Thank you so much for that welcome, Emmett. We really appreciate it. Good morning again, everyone. I'm Patrice Lallam. I'm the Interim Vice President for Carbon Management at the Great Plains Institute. And it is so wonderful to look out and see a lot of familiar faces, but also a lot of new faces. And we're so excited to connect with all of you over the course of the next couple of days. It's my privilege this morning to introduce our first speaker after our welcome. Rolf Nordstrom is the President and CEO of the Great Plains Institute, and he's a nationally recognized leader. He has more than 30 years of experience in energy and sustainable development policy, as well as practice in both governmental and nonprofit settings. And he has many unique strengths in brokering agreements among disparate interests on difficult public policy issues, which is one of the primary reasons why he's in the role that he is today. He has written or helped craft new laws on high-performance buildings, hydrogen, fuel cell technologies, resource-efficient land use, and sustainable development. And speaking for all of us at GPI, we are just so thrilled that he's here today, and we hope that you enjoy his presentation. Rolf, over to you.
What a generous introduction. Thank you, Patrice. How are you? Good morning. And another welcome. You got the good morning thing down. That's awesome. I think we can just all agree that it's difficult to follow Emmett. That was really, right? Emmett, thank you. And it is an honor to be on this land, and a huge thanks to everybody here at Tamaya for serving us and making us feel so welcome here. I am delighted to be here, really delighted, but more importantly, as Patrice said, really delighted to see all of you here. We are keenly aware that you could be any place else, but you have chosen to be here for the next couple of days. And so thank you for making the effort to be here. I have the privilege this morning of setting the table for our 2 days together, which are going to be terrific. And I'm going to talk about the role of carbon management in the U.S. meeting its climate and energy goals. But before I do that, and they're not going to be long, so relax. Before I do that, though, I do hope that you will join me in thanking my GPI colleagues, Patrice and all of the GPI colleagues. I think we all know that events like this do not plan and execute themselves, right? So there's been a lot of work by many and a lot of care and thought put into the next 2 days. So thank you, guys. I'm of course biased, but they are an exceptional group of people, and I feel really privileged to work with them. So the role of carbon management. I feel like we live, all of us, in this really extraordinary and maybe paradoxical time. On the one hand, hearkening back to your high school, pretty much everything on this planet is carbon-based, right? I mean, carbon is one of the building blocks of all life, at least life as we know it, including ourselves. That's on the one hand. And on the other hand, we find ourselves with too much carbon that we have put back in circulation in the atmosphere, unwittingly maybe, since the Industrial Revolution, and thereby having upset the natural carbon cycle that was at least in dynamic equilibrium on this planet before then. So I can't think of a more important time, never mind the backdrop that I'll talk about in a minute, that we find ourselves in, but can't think of a more important time to be talking about carbon management. And I'm so glad that both old folks who have been in the space for a long time and new folks are here. So before I go on about carbon management, though, I do want to just say a few words about the Great Plains Institute, because we might be new to some of you. And I can't tell you how gratifying it is for me to report to you that we've been around 25 years, and there has been, I would say in the last 10 or 15 in particular, increasing demand for the work that GPI does. The unique blend of energy expertise and stakeholder engagement, which is going to be a central theme here in the next 2 days, if you haven't already picked that up, and our consensus-oriented approach to working with many diverse interests to develop climate solutions. That approach turns out to have found a niche because it has driven our growth in the last 25 years. What began as a group of 3 people when I washed up on shore 25 years ago is now more like 75 really dedicated professionals spread across the US. Even if we have kept our deep prairie-like roots in the Midwest. We are based in Minneapolis, after all. As an organization, our vision and mission and our values really reflect how we have grown over the years, and I mean by grown, not just physically grown, but matured as an organization. And they describe well the world we are trying to bring about. So our vision is of an equitable net zero carbon economy as quickly as we can muster it. This vision really reflects our conviction that people from all walks of life, and I really do mean all walks of life, must come to see their lives and the lives of future generations benefit from this global transition to a healthier, cleaner economy. GPI's mission is to accelerate this transition to a net zero carbon emissions, but to do it in a way that is good for people, centers people, good for the economy, and yes, of course, good for the environment. We really believe that this triple bottom line is, in essence, the definition of long-term prosperity. Those are the ingredients for long-term prosperity. And it underscores the urgency we all face in transitioning to this net zero carbon world. As we pursue our mission, we're guided also by some core values. These are really important to us. They guide our work externally and inside the organization. And we really want to be seen as, not just seen, but be trusted, inclusive, equitable, pragmatic, and ultimately transformative in the work that we do. We're really about systems change. And collectively, these values guide us to want to help make this energy transformation something that people see themselves in and feel a part of, as opposed to something that is being done to them. Because at least in a democracy, that ain't gonna work. Indeed, I would say that that right there is our opportunity and our challenge. We have this monumental opportunity now for equitable implementation of clean energy solutions, including the full suite of carbon management solutions. But getting that implementation piece right, and you heard this last night for those of you who were here for a lovely reception, and our board chair, Priti Patel, talked about this too. Getting that implementation piece right is really the only way we're going to achieve the speed and scale of implementation that is required to meet our goals. So just a few things that characterize this moment, and this is probably a crowd I don't need to say this to, but just a few things that sort of shape the landscape that we find ourselves in. As you all know, in 2021, the federal government passed a suite of new federal laws, really future-proofing the US economy and helping us make good on our climate commitments, both domestically and abroad. Committing roughly $500 billion over 10 years, and even by US standards, that's real money. Now, don't get me wrong, we do need additional policies. We do, we will. But the next 10 years absolutely have to be about getting projects off the ground and in the ground in some cases. So we see in front of us, and I mean the royal we here, really an historic, and I know that word gets overused, but I think it's appropriate here, really an historic opportunity to help communities and states and utilities and other key actors implement clean energy technologies at an unprecedented pace and scale. All, this is important, all while ensuring that the jobs and the wealth creation opportunities that come along with that and the health benefits that come along with that are accessible to all. That's going to be key. Indeed, I would argue that this era of clean energy implementation will be defined by how successful we are at engaging people early on the options in front of them, the implications of those options, and how different solutions might help them meet their own goals, or at least align with their own goals. And you heard that theme again last night. In fact, the next 30 years and beyond, but particularly this next 30 years, I would argue is probably the biggest opportunity for invention and innovation since the Industrial Revolution. I really don't think that's hyperbole. We are sort of reimagining and reinventing how we do much of what humanity now depends on. And of course, carbon management in all its forms is a part of that innovation. So let's talk about carbon management for a second and climate. To avoid the worst effects of climate change, pretty much every climate model shows that it's not going to be enough just to reduce emissions. That's not going to be enough. We actually have to have a net removal. We need to permanently remove huge amounts of CO2 that we have already put back in circulation. Think on the order of 5 to 10 billion tons per year by 2050. Roughly the emissions of the United States per year, just to put that in perspective. And in fact, the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's most recent assessment suggests that carbon capture and removal is going to have to remove hundreds of gigatons, that's billions of tons, of cumulative emissions, both from industrial and power facilities, but also directly removing it, as I said, from the atmosphere, direct air capture, if we're going to have any chance of keeping global average temperatures to 1.5 degrees C. And I hate to note this, but in July, that was the average, 1.5. Now, that might be temporary, but it is not a good harbinger. And the thing about these carbon management technologies, which is, there's a suite of them, a family of them, is that they're not just about reducing emissions, although that's key. They also provide incredible economic benefits, or can, supporting economic growth in new, lower carbon industries, both existing and new, and creating and sustaining really high value jobs. And you know, in this jobs versus environment debate that this country has been wrestling with for decades, most people I know would like both. They would like to be employed, thanks so much, but they also want to pass along a world that is fit for the next generations. Carbon management preserves jobs at existing facilities through carbon capture retrofits, and it creates new jobs that transfer skills from the workforce to new sectors. So deployment of carbon management, and I know you all mostly know this, can help us decarbonize industrial and manufacturing and energy facilities, and thereby avoid plant closures and the offshoring of jobs and livelihoods. So as we strive to decarbonize the economy, this transition toward cleaner energy, we really need affected communities and workers to be at the center of our transition strategy. I would suggest that an essential priority for all climate policy solutions must be preserving existing jobs where possible and creating new ones that are equal to or better than those that are displaced. Now, this, of course, depends on the nature and scale of deployment, but carbon management technologies really are significant job creators. They can support an annual average of 68,000, up to 68,000 project development jobs and 36,000 ongoing operational jobs over a 15-year period, all while capturing and managing an estimated almost 600 million tons of CO2, metric tons per year. And that's to say nothing of the hundreds of thousands of jobs that we can create with a whole new direct air capture industry. But this is not just about workers. It's also about whole communities. And often the communities that are the most vulnerable to climate change are also the ones that suffer the most from criteria and other air pollutants. Carbon management can potentially play a role in addressing these concerns as well. And you'll hear more about that in one of the sessions in the conference. So just a word about GPI's carbon management program. We actually have been working in this space for 20 years. Really my entire time at GPI. Our original and necessary focus was to establish a federal policy framework for carbon management that could help us achieve economy-wide deployment of carbon management technologies by 2030 and putting us on that path. Then our portfolio of work expanded into states and regions, probably about 10 years ago, through an innovative, bipartisan, governor-led work group that was exploring carbon management deployment at the state level. That has been very successful and has broadened the conversation. But it broadened still more for us just last year. We extended our outreach and our educational efforts around the country to communities through the Carbon Action Alliance, which, as Bridget said, is the project at GPI that is hosting this conference. Really, our ultimate goal at the end of the day is to expand and accelerate economy-wide commercial deployment of the full suite of carbon management technologies and industrial decarbonization solutions by 2030, so that we are on the path between 2030 and mid-century, that those projects and the infrastructure they require can be scaled to meet our goals. We have 6 objectives that I'm just going to quickly tick through that we think can get us to that big, big goal. 1, implement a comprehensive carbon management and industrial decarbonization blueprint or roadmap, forged by consensus. And again, the Carbon Capture Coalition has been the forum for bringing together perhaps the most diverse coalition of industry, labor, NGOs, states, and other interests. The environmental justice community, which again is going to be a big theme today and tomorrow. That's number 1. Number 2, enact and implement a comprehensive suite of federal carbon management and industrial decarbonization policies and incentives. And again, we've made progress there, but there is more to do. And that's going to include, as I said, the full suite. So think carbon capture, removal, transport, utilization, storage. 3, support the responsible implementation of the bipartisan infrastructure law, which is just one of the federal laws passed recently. Then leverage our now more than several hundred strong state and regional network of state leaders and other stakeholders in support of federal and state policy reform that backs and promotes carbon capture and industrial decarbonization. 5, increase attention and engagement around environmental justice. I think we often find ourselves using the same words and meaning quite different things and maybe missing each other. So I think there's an important conversation to be had, a deeper conversation around equity and environmental justice. And it needs to include talk about jobs. It needs to foster empirical and really solutions-oriented policies and actions. And ultimately, it needs to ensure that the benefits of project development really flow to workers and communities. 6th, and finally, the last objective is to support the development of carbon and hydrogen hubs as really a critical strategy for scaling these essential technologies, especially for the hard to decarbonize sectors. Which brings us to Connect 2023. You know, making connections with people, it's not the only thing GPI does, but it's among the things that is at the heart of what we do. Making connections between ourselves and other people and creating a safe space where people can connect with one another and often bridging all kinds of divides. And we certainly hope that happens here. The aim of Connect is really to shift our collective conversation from learning to action, because we don't have the luxury of time. And again, this theme comes back. Effective stakeholder engagement and education is the way to achieve economy-wide deployment over the next decade. This is not principally a technology problem. This is about people. So that carbon management can fulfill its essential role in helping us meet those mid-century emissions reduction targets. So over the next 2 days, day and a half, we're going to feature a great and engaging combination of main stage talks, panels, interactive sessions that are going to highlight 5 things. The current state of carbon management, so you're going to hear from experts presenting on the state of carbon management. What are the opportunities for project developers, for communities, for local governments, and what is the consideration set around deployment? Community and worker benefits. You're going to hear researchers and representatives from labor and community organizations talk about how carbon management can contribute to things like improving air quality and creating family-sustaining jobs. Stakeholder engagement, again, community leaders, state and local policymakers, industry representatives are going to highlight efforts to elevate community perspectives and voices in project deployment. In addition, colleagues from the Great Plains Institute are going to demonstrate our new community decision support tool for siting projects, which is really slick. I think you're going to be impressed. We hope that ends up being a way to have a really productive, grounded conversation with people in communities. And then embedding Justice 40 principles. This is going to play a really important role in getting carbon management projects deployed. So federal, state, local leaders are going to share how these Justice 40 principles are being applied in the carbon management space. And finally, telling the carbon management story. Stories are powerful. At the moment, there are multiple narratives out there about carbon management. There's not a lot of alignment, so we have lots of work to do. And we humans, we are moved by stories more than facts. It's good to have facts on your side, but stories can be really compelling and move people. So you're going to hear from NGO and community leaders who will present opinion research highlighting community attitudes today around carbon management and where we need to do more work. Participants will discuss methods for addressing really common concerns that people have and how to center people in our education and outreach. That's it. That's all we have for you. It's all we could manage to put together on short notice. I hope that sounds like the event you signed up for and thought you were attending. Again, super excited to see you all here. Really grateful to be here myself. Here's my challenge or my invitation to you. If you don't already see yourself this way, I hope you leave the conference seeing yourself as part of this diverse, expanding network of folks who are trying to usher in an equitable net zero carbon economy as quickly as possible. Thanks very much. Yeah. I'm now going to turn the microphone back to my colleague, Bridget Callahan. So have a great day, and I'll see you around, because I'm going to be here.